All right, so you want to understand power, right? Like really get down to the nitty-gritty of how it works.
Well, today we're going straight to the source. Machiavelli's The Prince.
Now, this book, let me tell you, it's infamous for a reason.
It's intense.
Yeah, it's not exactly a feel-good guide to leadership, you know? But that's why we're doing a deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We're going to unpack the core ideas, the historical examples, and figure out what this whole Machiavellian thing is really all about.
I'm excited. This is a good one.
Oh, yeah, it's a classic. And we're tackling it with this, an audiobook excerpt. So no need to dust off those reading glasses.
Perfect.
Now, Machiavelli, he doesn't waste any time. He jumps right in, talking about different types of states. But the one he's really interested in.
Principalities.
Bingo. Principalities. Yeah. Basically, territories ruled by a prince. But here's the thing. Not all princes are created equal, right?
Right.
Some inherit their power, born with a silver spoon and a crown, you know?
Must be nice.
Right. But others, they have to fight for it, claw their way to the top. And that, my friend, makes all the difference.
It changes everything. Because for Machiavelli, dealing with a brand new territory, one you've just conquered, is a whole different ballgame, especially if it's full of different kinds of people.
Oh, you're talking about those mixed principalities he's always going on about,
yeah.
Like trying to mix oil and water, right?
Exactly. And he uses this great example, Louis XII in Italy. Total disaster. Talk about a cautionary tale.
So why are these mixed principalities so tricky, according to Machiavelli?
Well, imagine waltzing into a place where people speak a different language, have different customs, different laws, and saying, all right, everybody, we're doing things my way now. What could go wrong?
Sounds like a recipe for rebellion.
Exactly. Machiavelli says you have to understand the culture. And he uses those masters of empire, the Romans, to prove his point.
Ah, the Romans. Those guys knew a thing or two about conquering, right? So what was their secret?
Colonies.
Colonies.
Yeah. See, setting up colonies, Machiavelli says it's way cheaper than keeping a huge army in a hostile territory. And it's more strategic, too, right? You create little pockets of loyalty, kind of dilute the local population. A bit ruthless, if you think about it.
Wow, Machiavelli is not playing games, is he? He is all about practicality. But it wasn't just about brute force for him, right?
No, not at all.
He was really interested in this idea of skill versus luck. Like how much of being a successful ruler is about being in the right place at the right time versus actually being good at, ruling.
He wanted to know what set apart those lucky rulers from the ones who made their own luck, right? So he looked at some pretty big names in history to figure it out.
All right, well, let's start with the self-made successes, the ones who grabbed fate by the horns. Any familiar names in that bunch?
Oh, absolutely. You've got your Moses, your Cyrus, your Romulus, your Theseus. These weren't just lucky guys who happened to be in the right place at the right time.
They had something more.
They had the vision, they had the guts, and they knew how to use strategy to turn opportunity into, well, empires, basically. Machiavelli says that skill without opportunity might leave you powerless.
But opportunity without skill.
Completely useless, just wasted potential.
Okay, that's all well and good. But let's be real, Machiavelli doesn't exactly shy away from the, shall we say, less than savory methods some leaders use.
He does not.
So what about those rulers who, let's just say, weren't afraid to get their hands a little dirty?
Oh, he loves those guys. Dives right in. In fact, he uses Agathocles and what was that other guy's name? Oliverato da Fermo. Both known for being, well, a little cunning, let's say.
I was going to say ruthless, but yeah, not exactly the kind of guys you'd want to be stuck in an elevator with, unless you were hoping to never see the light of day again.
Right.
So how does Machiavelli justify putting these guys, the ruthless operators, in the same conversation as the Moses and Cyruses of the world?
Because for Machiavelli, it's about keeping it real. He's not saying, hey, everyone, go be a tyrant. But he is acknowledging that power can get messy.
It's a tough business.
Sometimes you have to make tough choices, maybe even cruel ones, to keep things from falling apart.
To maintain stability.
Exactly. And the best part, he actually gives a framework for how and when to use cruelty effectively. He calls it the one swift stroke strategy.
One swift stroke. I don't know why, but that sounds a little ominous, don't you think?
It does, doesn't it? But it makes sense, in a way. He's basically saying that it's much better to concentrate any unpleasantness into one decisive move. Rip the Band-Aid off,
Get it over with.
Minimize the chance of future unrest.
Interesting. So for Machiavelli, ruthlessness, when used strategically, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a tool.
A tool in the toolbox.
Even if it's a pretty intense one, right?
Right.
Definitely a bold statement, even by today's standards.
Totally. Oh, bold is an understatement. Machiavelli, he was way ahead of his time, and he wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers. But for him, it wasn't just about force, right? It was about psychology, too.
It's all about appearances, right? Like playing the game.
Exactly. The prince spends a surprising amount of time on how a ruler should present themselves. And some of his advice, man, it's still relevant today.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, check this out. He says a ruler should appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, even upright. But, and this is a big but,
I'm sensing a but coming.
be prepared to act against those virtues when it's necessary.
Whoa, cold-blooded. So you're saying it's about, like, strategically using these personality traits, even if you're, maybe not always feeling them.
Machiavelli would probably say it's less about faking it and more about understanding how power works on a deeper level.
It's like theater, almost.
Right. A ruler's got to play the part, embody those qualities that make people trust them.
But also know when to, bend the rules a bit.
Or break them. Machiavelli gets that. He even goes so far as to say that sometimes it's better for a ruler to be feared than loved.
Okay, see, that's where I get a little, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Didn't Machiavelli have anything nice to say about being loved?
He did. The ideal, he said, was to be both, loved and feared. The best of both worlds. But
There's always a but.
well, finding a ruler who can pull that off is about as likely as, I don't know, finding a unicorn riding a dragon while juggling chainsaws.
Okay, I get it. So love is out, fear is in. Is Machiavelli advocating for a reign of terror here?
No, not a reign of terror. It's very specific. He says it's better to be feared but never hated. There's a big difference.
So what's the difference?
Think about it.
Yeah.
Fear, it commands respect, right? People think twice before they cross you. Love can be fleeting. People can turn on you.
So project strength, but not cruelty. Don't be a monster.
Exactly. And the example he uses is Caesar Borgia. Now, there was a guy who knew a thing or two about power.
Caesar Borgia. Remind me who he was again.
Son of a cardinal, became this powerful military leader in Renaissance Italy. Machiavelli actually met him.
Oh, really?
Seemed to have made an impression because Machiavelli was impressed by his, decisiveness. Borgia knew when to be ruthless, but he also knew how to build alliances, make people loyal.
You walked that line. Feared, but not hated.
Nailed it. And that's what Machiavelli is getting at. A good ruler needs to be adaptable. Sometimes you got to play the tough guy, sometimes the diplomat, right?
It's about reading the room.
And surrounding yourself with people who'll tell you the truth. People who will give you good advice, even when you don't want to hear it. Wise advisors, he calls them.
Okay, so let's talk about those advisors.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a good team, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does Machiavelli say about picking your inner circle?
Yeah.
So finding good advisors, that's key. But what about the advice itself? What kind of wisdom should these trusted few be sharing with the prince?
Well, Machiavelli's big on honesty, like brutal honesty.
No sugarcoating.
None. He says good advisors tell the truth, even if it makes the prince sweat a little.
Okay, that takes some guts, right? Especially when you're next on the line. So how does a prince make sure they're actually getting the truth, not just what they want to hear?
Machiavelli says you got to create an environment where people aren't afraid to speak their minds. Make it clear that you value honesty over flattery.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Especially when you're the one in charge, right? It's easy to surround yourself with yes men.
Yeah.
But Machiavelli, he wasn't just about palace intrigue and power plays. He was also really passionate about his homeland, Italy. And he had some strong opinions about how to fix what he saw as its problem.
Oh, absolutely. Don't forget, Italy back then, it was like a jigsaw puzzle that had exploded. All these city-states constantly fighting, vulnerable. Machiavelli wanted a strong, unified Italy. And he thought a smart, ambitious leader could make it happen.
So the prince, it's more than just a how-to guide for rulers. It's also kind of a patriotic call to action.
Right. He wanted to light a fire under someone, Show them that a strong Italy wasn't just a dream. It was a necessity.
And part of that dream involved a strong military.
Right. Big time. Machiavelli was all about having a top-notch military. He said a good prince, he's got to be a skilled military leader. Someone who can inspire his troops.
Lead from the front, right?
Exactly. None of this hiding in the palace stuff. Machiavelli believed a ruler who wasn't willing to get his hands dirty wouldn't earn the respect of his soldiers.
Or his people.
Exactly. He also thought it was better to rely on your own people, your own citizens, than to hire mercenaries.
Because loyalty matters.
Loyalty wins wars. So yeah, Machiavelli set the bar pretty high for those aspiring to rule. But it wasn't just about military might, it was about understanding the human element too.
Psychology.
Psychology. He was big on that. He said a successful ruler, they had to be a student of human nature. They needed to know what made people tick, what motivated them, what scared them.
So not just a warrior, but also a bit of a mind reader.
Exactly. You got to know your audience. And maybe even more importantly, Machiavelli said a ruler has to be adaptable. What works in one situation might backfire in another. You can't be afraid to change your approach.
Always be learning, always evolving.
Right. Never stop learning. That was Machiavelli's biggest piece of advice. He said, the moment a ruler thinks they know it all is the moment they start to fail.
So as we wrap things up here, I think the big takeaway from The Prince is that there's no magic formula for leadership.
Nope.
Machiavelli, he gives you the tools, the strategies, the insights, but it's up to you to decide how to use them.
And that's what makes The Prince so relevant even today. It's not just a history lesson, it's a challenge. It's Machiavelli saying, okay, you want power, here's how to get it, how to keep it, but more importantly, what are you going to do with it?
What kind of leader will you be?